Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for allowing me to repeat my salient point that I will not ask for another delay. The people of this country have had enough of the delectable... The people of this country, Mr. Speaker, have had enough of the delectable disputation...
Order! This is profoundly disorderly. Members mustn't be shouted down in the chamber. They mustn't be shouted down in the chamber. There are standards to be upheld, and they must be. The Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is plain from the turbulent reaction of the benches opposite that they simply want another delay. And I will not have that. The public have had enough of the delectable disputations of this House, and I must warn members that their behaviour in thwarting the will of the people is undermining respect for this House in the country. Mr. Speaker, if honourable members want another delay, the only proper way to do it is to ask permission from our masters, the people, from our masters, the voters, and I commend this motion to the House.
The question is that there shall be an early parliamentary general election. I call the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The only point of any importance that the Prime Minister has just included in his speech is his clear indication that he does not intend to follow the law that has just been passed that requires him to ask for an extension under certain circumstances. He also, Mr. Speaker, gave no answer to the two decisions this House has already made today concerning the publication of Yellowhammer documents and his own behaviour as Prime Minister in respect of laws agreed by this House. Because the Prime Minister has failingly seemed to grasp that opposition benches have actually been very clear. That the House, Mr. Speaker, has expressed its will until the Act has been complied with and no deal has been taken off the table. No deal taken off the table. We will not vote to support the dissolution of this House and a general election. Now, I want an election, Mr. Speaker, as the Prime Minister pointed out. And the Conservative Party has very generously broadcast footage of me and my friends saying that we want an election. I don't retreat from that at all. We're eager for an election. But as keen as we are not prepared to risk inflicting the disaster of no deal on us, our communities, our jobs, our services, or indeed our rights. Mr. Speaker, no deal would not be a clean break. It would not mean just getting on with it. It would start a whole new period of confusion and delay. But this time, Mr. Speaker, set against a backdrop of rising unemployment, further deindustrialisation and of deepening poverty all across this country.
Order. I said a moment ago the Prime Minister should not be shouted down. Let me say to people who are shouting their heads off, it will be readily obvious to people observing our proceedings that's exactly what they're trying to do, including some extraordinarily stupid and noisy yelling from people secreting themselves behind the chair and thinking they're being clever. It's very low grade, it's very down market, it's very substandard, it's very boring, it's very predictable, and if the whips operated any sort of discipline, they would tell those people to try to get a life. The Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the point I was making was that it will be in a backdrop of unemployment increasing, deindustrialisation and deepening poverty within our society. Not very surprising that the government was so keen to hide the Yellowhammer documents, their own documents, which would demonstrate this to be the case. We have no faith that the government is seeking a deal in good faith. Indeed, the former Work and Pensions Secretary said in her resignation letter, I no longer believe leaving with a deal is the government's main objective. EU leaders have received no proposals. Government ministers have offered no explanation of the deal they are seeking, even if there is such a deal they're seeking, let alone any worked-out proposals presented to Parliament for scrutiny. No wonder they're so keen to prorogue so early to avoid any scrutiny of what they're doing. The only conclusion, Mr. Speaker, the only conclusion that can be reached, and it is backed up by all the leaked reports in the press, is that the government's pretensions to negotiate are nothing but a sham. The Prime Minister knows full well there is no mandate for no deal, no majority support for it in the country, and no majority support for it in this House. But he refuses to rule it out and refuses to set out any proposals to avoid it. Mr. Speaker, this is a very serious issue. The Prime Minister is running away from scrutiny, running away from scrutiny with his blather and his shouting. Many people, Mr. Speaker, including the member for Hastings and Rye, are in conclusion that no deal is his only answer. But he has no mandate for that, and the last general election gave no mandate for no deal. The 2016 referendum gives no mandate for that. And, Mr. Speaker, the co-convener of the Vote Leave campaign